we left with this. Every change in your life happens this way. It begins with a crisis, and it ends with a process. Okay? If you fail in the process, you have to go back to the crisis. Okay? Let me give you an example of that. Let's say that you are an alcoholic, right? And you start drinking a little bit on the weekends, and then it starts consuming you, and then you have to have a drink during the week, and then you have to have a drink every day, and then you wake up with a hangover, so you have to have one to get started. You get a DUI, you lose your license, you lose your job, you lose your house, you lose everything, and you're at a point of crisis in your life, and you say, this is not what the Lord wants for me in my life, and you repent, and you maybe go to rehab or find some tools or things that the Lord helps you to get over it and conquer that problem of alcohol, right? And then what happens is you forget about the havoc and the crisis you were at, and you begin again, once again, thinking that you can handle it, and you start being lured by the world, and you start making excuses, and one day you stop at the gas station and say, Jesus drank wine, so I'm going to get a Michelob, right? And then it begins the process again, and you know what happens? You end up at the same crisis, and then you have to go back what started the process again, right? And that's how lust works. If you were ever going to learn how to fight it, and we said last week, you need to come to a crisis. You have to come to the point where I am a child of God. He died for me. He wants me to be holy. He said, lifting up holy hands. And if I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. And I will have no power with God. And Joseph had God with him in the prison, but I do not have God in my life with this problem. I have to do something about it. You have to get to the point where you loathe not only the sin, but the fact that you're committing it. Right? And once you get to that point, then we can begin the process. But you know the problem is so many people have accepted this in their life. They're not at a crisis. You think it's okay to look at stuff on Saturday night and come to church on Sunday morning, and you think that God's okay with that, and He's pleased with you because you're sitting your tail end in the church pew this morning, and you put a little bit of money in the plate, and you sang some songs. God is more interested in obedience than sacrifice. That's what God's interested in. He looks on the heart, not on the outward appearance. And God looks at this very seriously. And if you can't come to that crisis, there's not much. You have to come to a crisis to get saved. I'm lost. I'm wicked. I'm an enemy of God. I'm on my way to hell. And that crisis starts the process to where you receive Christ and He saves you with no works, and then He begins to sanctify you. That's how lust is. If you are a child of God and you have a problem with this, and you surrender your life to it, you hide it for a while, you succumb to it for a while, if you are a child of God, eventually it will come to a crisis. And here's the thing. This is very important. You will either bring it to God or He'll bring it to you. Look, I have grown up around Christians my entire life, okay? And I have grown up in church and grown up with boys my age in church, okay? And you know what has happened to every one of us? Every single one of us is there were things that we never overcame in our teens and our 20s, right? And if we did not deal with it then, God always brought it to a crisis in our 30s. Always. Everyone that I went to Bible school with, they risked the destruction of their marriage. They risked losing their job. Every single one of them have come to a crisis that can give you a testimony of this about how God has helped them overcome it. If you don't bring it to God, He will eventually bring it to you, because the Lord loves you too much. He loves you too much to let this just go on. Whom the Lord loveth, He chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom He receiveth. And it's much better to bring it to God than have Him bring it to you. He that humbleth himself shall be exalted, but he that exalteth himself shall be abased. So how did Joseph escape? Look here in verse